Hey friends, my name is Dylan Bates. I'm so excited to be here on the FX Factory channel. Today we're going to be taking a look at making your very first video using Final Cut Pro. One of the key fundamentals to making your videos is organization. So I'm going to show you a really basic structure you can use for all of your videos down the road. We're gonna make a new folder here, and I'm gonna name it the project file. So we're just gonna call it first video. From there, we're gonna dive into that folder. We're gonna make a couple folders. We're gonna make one for footage and one for audio. From there, I'm gonna take the footage from this unsorted madness. I'm gonna drag that into my footage folder and drag the audio into the audio folder. Now that we have all of our footage sorted, let's go ahead and jump into Final Cut Pro for the very first time. When you first open up Final Cut Pro, if it looks super crazy like this, you can easily fix it by pushing Command 0, and that's going to get us all on the same page. From there, it's going to create this untitled project here when you first open up Final Cut Pro. Now, you can certainly just go ahead and rename this project, but what I'm going to show you is go ahead and close out that library. Then we're going to open a new project by clicking on Open Library and clicking on New. That way we can set the actual location of our library project. So then I'll just go to the desktop where I have my first video, and we're going to call it the same thing that we called our project name. So first video, and I will go ahead and push save. So now that library is going to be found within that folder that's on my desktop. Now from here, the first step we're going to need to take is importing our media. So go ahead and click on import. Then you're going to locate the desktop here, and you're going to locate your folder. Now you can just select the folder at its base level, or you can dive inside and see the audio and the footage. Now before we import anything, there's a couple options that we're going to want to make sure are enabled and disabled before we bring in the footage. So come over here to the right side. The first one that I'm going to super recommend is that you check the leave files in place. That is because if you do copy to library, it's going to copy the media that you import, thus duplicating it, thus duplicating the size of your library, making it super massive. Now there is one caveat. If you plan on traveling with this project, then you may want to actually copy the files to the new library. But for this, we're gonna leave the files in place. Then go ahead and make sure that your keywords are enabled from Finder tags and from folders. That'll be super helpful in keeping things organized. Then come down here, make sure balance color and find people are disabled. When you get down to the transcode options, these are helpful for speeding up the process of editing when you're working with really large files, but you can probably leave them disabled at this point. So go ahead and disable those. Down here in the Analyze Audio, just leave all of these disabled. So from there, we're gonna go ahead and push Import Selected. And because I had those two folders selected, you'll notice if I come over here to what's called the event, which I'll get into in just a second, and click this arrow, we now have the audio separated and the footage separated, which is really, really nice for quickly navigating around your footage. So the library, just like in real life, is going to have everything inside of it. Think of all the books as your footage, your audio, your graphics, everything. Then the events, which is what is selected here, is almost like a bookshelf. So it's going to be a more self-contained version of the library. It's going to have specific elements within that event. Now, I typically only make new events if I have multiple days of filming, or occasionally I'll use it for separate cameras. But I typically like to work within the event and have all these separated folders of audio and footage, which you can right click and you can create new keyword collections to have these collections right here for your organization purposes. From there, you can see we have our footage up here in this window here. Now this right here is your browser. The window to the right is the viewer, and then the bottom here is the timeline. To get stuff onto the timeline where we will be making the edits, we're gonna need to make a new project first. So come on down here and click on this new project button. From there, go ahead and rename this project. I like to name it the same as I named the library. So in this case, the name is First Video. Down here, you might see something that looks like this. So you had the option to use automatic settings, and Final Cut Pro is going to create the timeline based on the first piece of footage that you drop into the timeline. But what I'm going to recommend is click on Use Custom Settings, and depending on the footage you're working with, you'll probably want to use 1080p or 4K. I'm going to go ahead and select 1080p. You can set the frame rate. I'm going to leave it at 2398. Yours might be at 30. It just depends on how you like to edit. That's a whole other topic. From there, we'll go ahead and push open. So we now have what's called the magnetic timeline. The magnetic timeline is so powerful and one of my favorite features in Final Cut Pro, but I'll get into it in just a second. First, we're gonna show how to get footage down into the magnetic timeline. So to do that, you'll see we have our footage here. Now, as I bring my mouse over the top of it, it's going to scrub, which is a really nice feature for quickly finding what you need in your shot. If you don't want it to scrub, you can disable it with S, or you can come down here to the bottom right and click on this icon here, which will disable scrubbing for you. So to find the section of footage that you want, you're gonna scrub through your shot. You're gonna push I for in, then you're gonna move forward and find the ending of the shot and push O for out. Then from there, you can either click and drag down to the timeline, or you also have these other icons here, which I'll show. So let's say we want this shot in there above the clip we just dropped. We'll push I for a selection and O again. We'll come down here and say that we want that shot to be on top of the shot we just dropped. We'll press this icon, which can also be accessed with Q, and that will drop it on top of the footage that's down here in the main timeline. Now, what's cool about this is that piece of footage is going to constantly be connected to the footage that is dropped on top of. And you can tell what the footage is connected to via this little tail that's attached right there. So that is showing you where it's connected on this main timeline. So if I were to move this footage way over here, you can see how it just sticks with it the entire time. The next button here is if we bring in the footage, we'll select it and we'll push the insert button, which can also be accessed with W, and that's going to insert the footage wherever the playhead is. Now, you didn't really see it happen there, but if I were to take this footage, so I'll zoom in here with Command plus, and you can do that with Command plus or minus. And now if I take that footage, select it, and I push W to insert it, you'll see how it made a cut in the footage, and then it pushed the footage to the complete other side. Then we have the append option. So if I have this other footage selected here, again, I'll select I and O to make a selection. We'll push E, or you can push this icon here, and that will push it to the very end of the timeline. Finally, this last icon here is the overwrite icon, and it's just how it sounds. If you push D, it's going to overwrite wherever your playhead was. Now, it should be noted, you also have the ability to enable video only or audio only or all by clicking on this down arrow right here. Just to the right of that is all of the different tools that you will be using on the main timeline. Now, the main ones we're gonna focus on are the select tool and the blade tool today. Now, let's say that this shot is too long and I want to shorten it down. We have several options for how to shorten it. Firstly, you can just click on one edge and drag and shorten it or lengthen it however much you need. Now, it should be noted, if I were to extend this out, when I get to the point where there is no more footage happening, then it will create a red version of this icon. Another way we can shorten this clip is by pushing B, which is the blade tool. And again, you can select that from this menu here. We'll just click wherever we want the cut to happen. Then if we go back up and push A for the selection tool, we can click and select that icon and push delete. A quick tip is if you hold down the B key when you go to click, when you release it, it's going to leave it as the arrow key so you don't have to keep switching back between B and A all the time, saving you just one extra click. So let's go ahead, we'll drop some more footage down here on the timeline, and now we have our basic edit happening. Now, this is where I'm going to showcase the magnetic timeline. The magnetic timeline is called the magnetic timeline because the left side is essentially magnetized. All your footage is going to constantly be pushing to the left-hand side, as you can see here. So if I drag this way over here, it's just going to keep pushing it to the left. If I pull this clip out and place it on the right side, you can see how everything just keeps sliding. Some people find this feature annoying, but I super recommend that you really try and embrace this feature because it's one of the most powerful features that Final Cut Pro has, and it will make you a way faster editor if you can go ahead and just get used to the magnetic timeline. Now, it's only going to be magnetic in this dark gray section here. So keep that in mind. If you have footage above, that footage is going to be connected to whatever is in this dark gray area. So like I showed at the beginning, that footage up here is connected to the footage down below. Now here's another quick tip. If you push Command and Option and click on the footage in a separate location, you'll see how the connection point has shifted. So if I were to have a cut here and I want this clip to be connected to this particular clip here, I can push Command and Option, click there, and wherever I clicked is the new connection point. So that will hopefully save you some headache that you might have down the road. Also, if you don't want this upper clip to be affected by the clips down below, you can push the tilde key. It's in the top left under the escape key. And when you click that, it's going to give you this little orange icon. So you can click and drag and you'll notice how this clip did not shift around at all. So those are just a couple quick tips for navigating the magnetic timeline. And again, I super recommend that you really try and embrace the magnetic timeline as much as you can, and you will be a way faster editor. So we now have our basic clips down on the timeline. We want to do some basic color correction. To do that, you can select your clip, go over to the effects browser, which is found in this icon right here, and you'll see there are so many effects that you can mess with. And if you install any plugins or anything, they'll be found either here or in the titles up there, which I will show later. We're gonna go ahead and find the color board effect. Now to apply it, you can either double click on it or you can click and drag, whichever you prefer. Now, nothing is happening just yet, but if we go up here to the upper right, you'll see this little colorful icon next to the color board. Go ahead and select that, and now we have this color board right here. The colors on the bottom side underneath the line are actually the opposite of whatever's being shown. So this is super useful for color theory because a lot of the time you want to work with opposing colors to get a pleasing look. So something that's super common in Hollywood is the teal and orange look. So that means that they take the shadow areas, push them into the teal, and they take the midtones and push them towards the orange. And that generally creates a really nice color contrast. It's become somewhat cliche, but it is an effective tool. Now in here we have the global controls, so this will affect everything, and I'm going to undo that with Command Z, which you can undo anything with Command Z. Then we have the shadows here, we have the midtones, and we have the highlights. Now from there, we can go ahead and move into the saturation section. Now over here, we have the global controls for everything to be more saturated. We have the shadows saturation, the midtones, and the highlights. Then over here, we have the exposure. So if we wanted to create more contrast, we could take down the dark areas, we could bring up the highlights. And then if we wanted a global control, again, it's over here on the left-hand side. We now have these color corrections made to this image, but I want them applied to all of the images. So to achieve that, all we need to do is select our clip. If we go up to Edit, we can go down to Copy, or you can achieve that with Command C. Then we can select this first clip and this other clip by holding the Command key. Then we can go up to Edit, go down to Paste Attributes, and that will give us this box. So you can see that it has our color board from the first shot that we copied, and that will be pasting onto the two new clips. So now they will have the exact same color correction that we just applied. After that, we can go to each individual clip and adjust the grade accordingly. So I could bring up the exposure on this specific shot, or maybe this shot, I want a bit more contrast. And you can affect each individual grade according to taste. Let's take a quick look at transitions. Transitions can be accessed via this icon right here, and you will see all of your transitions are found here. Mine might look a little bit different because I have some plugins installed. To apply a transition, there's a couple options. You can just click and drag, and this is probably the one that you're going to use the most, and you can drag it to any of your clips here. Or if you want to save some time, you can push Command T, and that will automatically apply the cross dissolve transition. So from there, we can zoom in, and you can see we have a few icons on this transition. So on the top, there's these double lines. If you click and drag that, that is going to extend the clip that is underneath. So I'm clicking and dragging, and this clip to the left is being extended or retracted. But if we go a little bit lower down here to the middle, we can shorten or lengthen the transition according to taste. Now, if I extend the transition beyond its possible length, you'll see that one edge has turned red. If we want to adjust that, we can click in the middle, slide it to the left, and now we have a little bit more room on the transition. So that applies to just about any transition. Let's say we want to add some music onto our clip. Well, what we can do is find our music track here, and we can just drag that onto the timeline. Audio is always going to be underneath the timeline, whereas video clips are always going to be above the timeline. So you can see the audio is attached here to this first clip. And again, I can change that connection point at any time with Command Option. Now, what we can do to see the audio better is come over here to the right side and click on this film strip, and we can actually change the zoom levels here. We can also change how high the audio waveforms are, and we can also change the clip height. Now, with the audio, we have this little tiny icon right here. And if we click and drag, that's going to give us a fader handle. So if you want to fade in on your music or fade out, you can totally do that. You can also right click it and change the kind of curve that this audio has. So now it has this nice S curve. Additionally, if you need to make keyframes in your audio to raise or lower the volume, you can actually push Option, and you'll see how my mouse changes to have this little dark icon next to it. We'll click and we can create keyframes on the audio. So I'll click here, click here, click here, and click there. So now I want these two middle items to lower in volume. So I'll select one, I'll hold Shift and select the other, and now I can drag these down. Or you can also click and drag on the line in the middle, and that will affect both of them, making it really easy. Then I can slide this audio handle out as much as I need to, so you have a lot of control for changing your volume levels very, very quickly using that. If that doesn't work very well for you, you can also come up here to the top right, and you'll see in the audio panel here, I have the ability to add keyframes, and that is an important factor in Final Cut Pro. So I have the left arrow, which will push me back to the closest keyframe. The front arrow will push us forward to the nearest keyframe, and we can go forward. We can add in a keyframe here. We can move forward, add in another keyframe, lower the volume, and you'll see how that's affecting my clip down here in the timeline. So let's say I want the audio to end as this last scene is here. I'm going to push B. When you cut a clip after the main timeline here, you'll see that it created what's called a gap clip. A gap clip is completely null. It's just an empty object. It's not black, it's not white. It's just a completely transparent object. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that. And you'll notice that because this clip here was attached to the gap clip, it also deleted the clip underneath. So again, that is something where you have to be mindful of where your connection points are made. So you can push Command Option, change the connection point, and delete that gap clip. But I actually don't want that audio, so it worked out in our favor. I'm gonna go ahead and have the music fade off here, just like that, using that audio slider handle. So let's take a quick look at titles. Let's say we wanted to add in some titles here. We'll go to our titles panel. Now the one I use all the time, but you can definitely look through all the titles that you have, is the basic title, or I also use the custom title. So let's go ahead and bring the basic title in here. So with the title, you'll see we have several panels here. If this title has additional parameters, you can actually check those using this box right here. But this one does not have any additional parameters. So we'll go over to this box here, which is where we can change the actual text. So I can just write hello world, subscribe. Now from here, we can change the scaling. We can change the font however you like. And then you can actually scroll down and you have a lot more options. So if we wanted to change the color, we could change the face. And all of these other options are definitely for a different tutorial, but you get the general idea. Now, what you can do with the titles is you can actually click on them within the window and drag them around as needed. Now, something that should be noted is that you cannot animate the size right here in the title. I don't know why. Maybe someday they'll fix that. So if you want to animate the scale of your title, you got to go over into the film strip here, and you will see there are so many different options here. We're just going to take a look at the transform options. So we have rotation, position, scale, all of that. But let's say we want this title to actually scale up. We could click here. Again, we're going to add a keyframe using this icon next to the scale, move forward, and then we'll animate the scale up. And so now over that duration, the scale is going to increase. If you're not particularly happy with where your keyframe is, you can actually right click on your title and go down to show video animation. And you'll see these couple dots here that show you exactly where the animation is taking place on your title. So you can actually click and drag those just like the audio keyframes, but they're actually for video to change the duration of those items. I'm going to push Command T to add in a transition so that this title fades in. Just like that, we now have a title. So we have our glorious video all ready to go and show to the world. How do we export it? Well, come on up here to this share menu, click on this icon. I have a lot more options than you're likely going to see, but what I super recommend is you just select export file, or you do one of the Apple devices options, and that is going to process a lot faster on YouTube. I'm going to go ahead and just do export file. Go on over to your settings and you'll see that it's probably using Apple ProRes 422. Now, ProRes is a great codec, but it's very, very large, and we want it to squeeze down the size a bit for an internet video. Under the video codec options, go ahead and click here and go down to H.264. H.264 is still a very high quality codec, it's just much smaller in file size. Down here you can actually see the size of your video, and you can go ahead and push next, and now you can select the location that you want to export. Now what I recommend is in your video folder, you create another folder and we call it exports or something like that. Go ahead and push save. And so now you'll see if we come up here to the top left, we can see it exporting. Now it's a short video, so it's exporting very quickly. So now it is exported the video is finished. We can show it to the world, upload it to YouTube, do whatever we want to do. I hope this was helpful to you. If it was, consider pressing that like button. Make sure you press subscribe because I'm going to be here on the FX Factory channel so much more, and I can't wait to see you in the next one.